Now it's time to move on to the mixing and mastering portions, which are also the most time-consuming. Before we move into the control room, I'm going to highlight some things to keep in mind as you start to mix your project. Some of these points will vary in importance and relevance depending on what you've recorded and how you've recorded it. Mixing and mastering are two different things. Mixing is the actual mixing and tweaking of all recorded tracks. Mastering is by definition the process of transferring your final mix to a master copy that will be duplicated and distributed. I like to add a little more to that explanation. My mastering process would be to add final overall compression, EQ, and a room reverb to the master track, and finally adding ISRC codes to each track, author info to the project, and CD text when burning the master copy. Treat drums like a group of multiple instruments, not a single instrument like a guitar or vocal. It's important to bear in mind that there are a bunch of other instruments in close proximity to the one that your mic is trying to pick up. Basically, keep bleed and phasing in mind when trying to separate each drum. Remember to equalize each drum on its own EQ spectrum. For example, if you remove mids from toms and kick, but remove lows and highs from the snare, you'll get great separation to where the drums will be easily defined in the final mix. Phasing may help to remove bleed or waving cymbal sounds. If you hear a sort of swishing or waving sound from the cymbals, try reversing the phase on one of the overheads, or one of the other mics that might be picking up more of the cymbals. Phase inverting can also be necessary if one or more of your mics on the kit are facing in the opposite direction than the others. Compression and gating are the keys to tight sounding drums. Gates because you are minimalizing the sound coming from drums other than the one you want to hear. Compression to keep each hit as dynamically similar as possible. If gates cannot remove enough of the bleed, you might use a volume envelope to lower the total level on the track between hits. Listen on multiple sets of speakers after a few changes. You'll end up hearing every instrument on this project hundreds of times. If you don't, you're not taking enough time working on it. Here in the studio, I've got 3 different sets of speakers hooked up to my system. I can switch them all on or off at any time, making it possible for me to simply walk back and forth between the rooms to hear the project playing on all 3 sets. It's also a good idea to burn the project to CD and play it in your car or home stereo when you stop for the day. When I do this, I generally write down the issues I hear so I can work from a list the next day. Eventually, this will lead to a finished project that sounds good on just about any playback device. Good enough is not good enough. If you are sick of the song or your ears turn to mush, quit for the day. Most changes made after ear mush sets in are later considered no good and get thrown out. Once mixing is finished and you have your levels, EQ, effects, and compression all set for each track, and you've listened to the track on multiple devices and speaker sets, we can now master the final mix by adding a multi-band compressor, 31-band EQ, and room reverb to the master track.